So I can read the disclosure statement. So first of all, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for participating in this call. Herb and I are very excited to have it and have you with us. I'm going to read a disclosure that we have of Menschwork for our webinars. Thank you for attending the webinar. As was explained in the email, Menschwork will be recording portions of tonight's webinar, and portions may be posted on menschwork.org. By participating in the webinar, you consent to having your participation in the recorded portions posted online. And that's, of course, like if you raise your hand and say something. For tonight's webinar, Menschwork will only be recording the initial introductory portion of the program. The second portion, which will not be recorded, will be an opportunity for all participants to share their thoughts and perspective in a frank and candid manner. This portion of the program is intended to respect participants' confidentiality and will not be recorded by Menschwork. We will inform you when the non-recorded portion of the webinar begins. Although we ask all participants to respect participants' candor and confidentiality, please understand that Menschwork cannot guarantee or assure any participants of confidentiality. If you are not using headphones and family members, friends, or other persons are nearby, please consider moving to another room or lowering the volume to limit their ability to hear the personal discussion. We further request that no participants personally record or distribute any aspect of this program. Thank you for understanding and cooperation.
Great. Thank you, Ori. So my name is Herb Levine, and Ori Alon and I are facilitating this call. And we agreed that we would begin with a conversation between us that will at least begin with some interview questions from me. Now, I haven't written them down and we haven't rehearsed this, but I am curious, and I thought you'd be curious, about how this all began. So I want to ask you, Ori, a little over about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when the Me Too movement suddenly came to prominence. It was around the unmasking of Harvey Weinstein and his activities. What made you think of Menschwork, of bringing this conversation to a JMR, to a Jewish men's retreat? What about the Jewish men's retreat made it seem to you like this was a good venue for opening up this subject?
So I've been going to the retreat at that point, I guess, for 7 years, and the retreat feels, whatever my spiritual journey at the moment, or whatever my relationship to religion or Judaism, it feels like a sacred place, like a place to do sacred work, whether it's like spiritual or work on myself or on my relationship, my habits, my who I am, basically. And when the Me Too started, it felt very like things happened fast. Like it was like within a few days, the campaign became very viral, and everyone, I assume most of us who are in this call, read statements of their spouses or friends, or sometimes even their mothers or daughters or sisters. And it felt, if I remember correctly, it was just a few weeks before the retreat. And
right.
So it felt, for those of you who don't know how the retreat is planned, there's usually a planning committee, and it's a few months of process, and some of it can be very intense. So it wasn't time to make a retreat about the Me Too, just because of the way it just wasn't possible to do such thing. But I suggested to the planning committee, hey, this feels something that will be even like a Chilul Hashem, if you'd like to use that term, like a blasphemy, not to do something about it in the retreat. This is what's happening now, we cannot ignore it. So I suggested that we do a mishpacha group, a sharing circle, a confidential sharing circle about the Me Too. And we neither, I know that I didn't know exactly how it's going to be. And again, everything was very, very new. And
right. And so we had a session. It was I believe a 90-minute session during free time on that Shabbat afternoon, and about 15 men were there. Some of them are on the call tonight. And it began with you and me sharing our own Me Too stories, and then we opened it up to the group. What do you remember about? And then we did it a second year. I'll come to the second year in a bit, but what do you remember about that experience? What are you still taking away from that experience?
there's a lot. There was a lot there. There was a lot of unpacking and processing and sharing, and each man had something to share. Like some shared of how of things they're ashamed of. Other people shared like, oh, this happened to my sibling or my sister, and I could have done something. Like I could have stood up better. And the generational thing was the generational difference was very. In my, I at least noticed it. Like the younger men were, for them, it was like like almost like obvious in a way. And some of the older generation had stories of like, oh, like the social norms were very different 20, 30, and 40 years ago. And there was I think that there was some bonding that happened in this experience of understanding like this the generational thing, and obviously 100 years ago it probably was even very different.
Right. So I remember from that first conversation that there were people who said things that they'd been sitting on for 30, 40 years that they'd never told anyone. And this is after being veterans of Menschwork and of coming to many JMRs, they were still sitting on stuff. So it just suggests how much this stuff is in the shadows. So why don't we talk a little bit about men's work more broadly? What does it mean to lift up what's in the shadows to you of our masculinity? What is the virtue? What is the benefit to us all of looking at the dark stuff and lifting it up?
Well, it's a little bit like mold, or like any something that is out there, and if it's in the darkness, it will keep growing in the darkness, and the only way to the way to heal it is expose it to the light, and once you air it out, you can talk about it, or once it's mentionable, it's manageable. And I think it is very scary.
Did you just coin that? Probably not. When it's mentionable, it's
no. This is Mr. Rogers. No, I was. I thought,
really?
I thought everyone knows it. I'm sorry.
No, not everyone, because I didn't know it. If it's mentionable, it's manageable. Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. And it was so hard to mention these things. And as you said, like even people who went to JMR and talked about their relationships or their marriage or their breakups or things that are very personal and very they needed like confidential space to share them, did not share about these things. And this is what was so powerful about the Me Too. That was like, oh, there was a call for us to do this kind of work. And
right. It had a hashtag. It was me. I think it was the hashtag.
Yeah.
Let's reflect briefly on the second year, because we did this conversation a second year. Again, 15 men came, but not necessarily the same 15, and some newcomers.
Yeah.
This was right after the Kavanaugh hearings, as I recall.
Yes. Interesting timing for the retreat again.
And it was a very different conversation. My memory is that it was more focused. More people talked about their partners coming forward and talking about their experience of having been victimized, especially the younger men. And that struck me that, in the year between the two conversations, the first time it was a lot of these were our secrets, but now because of the Kavanaugh hearings, and the way women felt unseen and
Yeah.
disrespected by that process. More and more women were speaking up to their partners, to their men, and the men were feeling some responsibility.
Yeah, that's a good observation, and yeah, that's, I think that definitely you are right about the content of the what people shared in the second year. I think what feels to me is like I'm very clear that we're gonna do it next year again. So it becomes I don't know if tradition is the right term, but it's definitely become more responsibility. Like, this is what we do, and whatever happens in the political wars, or like, it's just part of the work of Menschwork is to have this conversation now, and I'm glad that we're doing it as an organization.
Beautiful, beautiful. So we said we'd talk for about 15 minutes, and that's just a little less than 15 minutes, but we wanted, before we go to the confidential part of the evening, just to give another few minutes, if there's anybody who was at one of those gatherings, who wants to talk about what it meant to them. So in other words, comments that are more general in nature rather than revealing your own deep dark secrets would be appropriate right now. How are you glad that Ori is committed to having this be part of Menschwork on an annual basis? Let me call on the people who are on the phone first, in case, since I don't see your hands, in case you wanted to comment, just unmute and let us know.